Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to the PrimateCast. The release date for today's podcast is Saturday, March the 12th, 2016. It's been a little bit since our last show, but here we are back again and super happy to welcome back to the PrimateCast my good friend Dr. Chris Martin. You also may know is co-founder of the PrimateCast along with myself. And we're going to be talking about some of the things he's been doing over the last couple of years and why he's back in Inuyama, Japan now. So without further ado, let's just get right into that. Okay, so what are you doing back here?
So this is my first trip back to Japan since I left after my postdoc.
Almost exactly 2 years.
2 years, yep. So I went directly from here, PRI, to Indianapolis Zoo, which had just opened a new orangutan exhibit. The International Orangutan Center is what they called it. And it was a huge project for the zoo to build this thing and get 9 orangutans for it. And it was a huge undertaking. And one of the things that they wanted to do was a cognition program. They already had one in place with Dr. Rob Shoemaker. They wanted to expand it, and they asked me to help them. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Okay, and so it's connected to why you're here. So we'll come back to the orangutans in Indonesia later. But so this coming weekend is the last lecture,
right?
Like for Professor Matsuzawa, who was he was
my supervisor.
Mentor, your supervisor.
Yeah, so it worked out well because there was a symposium in Inuyama this week for the primatology and wildlife science program.
Yeah.
So I get to go to that, present a talk on some of the stuff I'm doing at the zoo, and then it kind of overlapped with his last lecture.
That was really cool, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, the stuff you're building at ED Zoo is really awesome.
Yeah, it's been cool. It's been a cool job, for sure.
So, what do you think of what's going to be the feeling for the last lecture?
Yeah, well, I know there's been a lot of buildup. There's been actually a really cool. So the Facebook page for Saga, Support for African Great Apes, has been regularly posting kind of a retrospective of Matsuzawa's career with different tidbits and photos and videos. Mm-hmm. And that's been going on for the past few months, kind of building up to this lecture. So it's been cool to kind of retrace his career and all the cool stuff that he's done leading up to this moment. Yeah.
And then I guess the talk will be in Kyoto in the clock tower.
Yeah, right. Get back to ground zero of Kyoto University. So.
Yeah, the iconic place.
Yep.
I guess it'll be pretty well attended.
Yeah, they're selling tickets and stuff. That's cool. Yeah.
You expect a reunion of past Matsuzawa students as well?
Of course, there's everyone that's already here in Japan. I'm not sure how many of his international students are coming back, but I'm certainly happy to be part of that crew.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. It's nice to sit back down in the studio.
Yeah. Well, it's been cool to kind of listen to PrimateCast after leaving and see it grow, and it's cool.
Yeah, we've been doing okay.
Yeah.
Not very active of late. I hope that's going to change soon.
Well, I think one of the cool things about the PrimateCast since we started was the whole concept of doing conferences. And having students engaged and giving interviews, because then you get so many interesting people all at once at a conference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's been great.
Yeah, the last IPS, we had tons of interviews and got quite a few shows out of that. And that reminds me of the new IPS coming up in August in Chicago.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Definitely.
So we've been promised some kind of booth and a location meetable to get interviews and harassing people.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see how that works out.
So Steve Ross, Lydia Hopper, if you're listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so 2 years, and in the intervening time, you've been setting up and building at Indianapolis Zoo. So before getting on to what you're doing, how was the transition from being a student, then postdoc here at PRI and working with the chimps, and then starting anew in Indy?
Well, it was. I thought it was a pretty smooth transition. PRI is unique in a lot of ways at Kyoto University. The chimps have been doing computer tasks for decades. They're all experts, and so I think it was a little bit of a challenge to go and work with apes who didn't have that much experience, and kind of spend some time training them. So yeah, work-wise, that was a bit of a challenge, but the zoo is such an accommodating place, and there's just a lot of excitement in the air at Indianapolis Zoo with the new exhibit opening. So yeah, so work-wise, it was great. And then again, there was a bit of a culture shock for sure.
Right.
After being in Japan for 7 years. But it's okay. Yeah. Feels comfortable.
It's home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what kind of things were you doing with the orangutans there?
So here at PRI, I kind of worked on a new system. It was a shared touch panel task system. So for more than 20 years now, the apes here have been doing touch panel, but it's always with one touch panel right in front of them. So when I was here, I wanted to kind of change that paradigm a little bit and have two chimps working on a shared task over two touch panels or a shared screen. So I that was what I worked on for my PhD here, and it caught the attention of the Indianapolis Zoo folks because they were very interested in creating a similar system, but instead of having two apes, you would have a human visitor or a zookeeper or someone, and then an ape on the other side collaborating on tasks. So it was kind of a good match. So I went there and built a similar system for the exhibit itself as like a feature of the exhibit.
And so in your talk at this symposium we just had, and also I think there's probably some news from Indianapolis about it as well. You had you're showing videos of the orangutan playing Pong with zoo visitors. Sure.
Yeah, so they play this virtual ping pong game, and that started out as a training element. These orangutans, they do have experience with touch panels because they've been working with Dr. Rob Shoemaker for a while now, and actually a lot of these orangutans came with him from where he worked before at the Great Ape Trust in Iowa. So they have had a fair amount of experience with touch panel, but like I said, with the PRI chimps, it's been kind of focusing on the one touch panel in front of them. So I tossed around some ideas for how do you get the apes to want to understand that the two touch panels are connected to the same task, and to kind of shift their attention from the one in front of them to the one that's beside them. And I thought that the ping pong task would be a nice way. It started out with just a dot that would move between the screens, and when they touched the dot, they'd get fed. And then I built on that and added kind of the paddles. They had to touch the ball to the paddle, and it was just kind of a progression. But I think it's interesting. I think the same reasons why Pong was the first video game kind of overlap with my reasons for doing it. It's like a first task because it's so simple.
Yeah.
This idea of just passing something between two different places on a screen.
Yeah.
And it was very intuitive to them. Another thing that's great about tasks like that, and I've worked on some others too at the zoo, like tic-tac-toe and a memory card game I'm doing, is they're the type of tasks that visitors, they walk in, they see it, right away they know what it is. It doesn't require any explanation. And I think in a zoo environment, if we're trying to do these kind of public demonstrations of the intelligence of apes, it requires a lot of education, and the whole package has to be kind of easy for people to understand, and for them to be able to see something that they already recognize really helps with the process. So that was a huge benefit for that. Yeah.
So I know that for places like zoos, and especially the more modern or progressive zoos, like it seems India Zoo is an example of, having the research being conducted out front and so very visible to the public, and now even in your case interactive with the public was really important. But so coming from a place where like PRI, where it's just strictly research focused and you really didn't have that dynamic at all,
right?
How was that for you?
It's it's a really interesting niche, and I think just to get back to the tasks, so this kind of goes along with that story. Here, a lot of the tasks are very kind of erudite psychology tasks, like match to sample, visual search. And these are the paradigms that psychologists, the toolboxes we're used to working with. And that's great. But if you want to educate the public on these things, it's a bit more of a challenge because you have to actually explain the task to them, and then they can kind of take in what the animal's doing. So what I tried to do to kind of simplify the zoo process was to come up with these tasks where, on the one hand, people would recognize right away what the apes are doing, but on the other hand, I could kind of mold the tasks a little bit to answer research questions. So I'm kind of doing both these things. And so, that's kind of the biggest difference, I think, between here and the zoo.
And so for a game like Pong, the orangutans, as you mentioned, seem to pick it up fairly quickly, and now are playing quite well against the humans that are visiting.
Right.
But then some of the other games, like the memory card game.
Sure.
Are they equally good or a little bit harder for that?
It's a bit harder. I mean, I'd be curious to see how the PRI chimps would do, just because they've had so much experience with computer tests. And I think a lot of the challenges with the orangutans has been a training issue. So they're not starting from the same place as humans or the PRI chimps. So it's a little bit hard to dissociate between, their natural intelligence and ability to solve problems and the need to train them on the paradigm that they use to solve those questions.
So for someone who's got now multiple years of experience with these two great ape species, I mean, what are your impressions on doing the task, but also just what they're good at, what they're not so good at?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting to kind of compare and contrast the captive chimps and the captive orangutans. I mean, they certainly have very different personalities. I find myself continually kind of surprised and impressed by some of the things the orangutans do. I think that they're very thoughtful and methodical and deliberate. So in contrast, I mean, obviously there's differences between individuals in both species, but I think that one of the themes that I see with the orangutans is that they do tend to think a lot about what they're about to do. And then with chimps, I think sometimes you get kind of a shoot first, ask questions later kind of thing, where they just want to do something and then see the outcome and learn from that. Whereas maybe orangutans like to kind of think it over a little bit before they do something. But, that's just kind of an intuition that I've seen. And it's not really, I'd like to someday maybe back that up with data.
Sure.
That's kind of, I think there might be something there with that.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely interesting in the video, which you actually let progress for a pretty long time during the symposium, with the orangutans doing the 8-card memory matching game. And
they do just keep going. They're very persistent, and they're problem solvers. And I think they like to be mentally challenged. So one of the core features of the touch panel program at the zoo is to make it voluntary. So if they don't want to do the task, they don't have to, and they really overwhelmingly choose to do it every day. It's something they really enjoy doing. So and I think that's a really important point to get across in general for this type of stuff, especially at zoos where you're kind of in the public eye.
So what would you say currently with your research and just aims at the zoo? What kind of message are you trying to really get across to the people there? And have you noticed any progress in that?
Sure. So it was about a year after I started, I kind of started thinking about how, in a lot of ways, compared to a typical zoo signage or zoo exhibit where people kind of flow through and they kind of determine the amount of time they want to spend at a particular spot, we kind of have this interesting situation where the apes are working on the computers and people will spend more time than normal watching them. So I started thinking about, and Rob Shoemaker as well, okay, well, we have kind of a bit of kind of a captive audience here. Can we use that opportunity to kind of reach out to them and maybe send a conservation message to go along with the research? And I think that those two things go along together very nicely. Right. Because on the one hand, you're kind of creating some empathy for the apes because people recognize how smart they are by the kinds of things they can do, problems they can solve on a computer screen. And then you can use that kind of empathy to compel them to make conservation action. So one of the cool features at the Orangutan Center at Indy Zoo is we have these donation kiosks. We have where they can donate to reforestation efforts in Borneo.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the public outreach, we're really just trying to create a new system that involves the touch panels on the one hand, the conservation message, and then the conservation action. So they all kind of go together. And I think it's a really nice model that I'm hoping will spread to other zoos. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
Thanks.
So good luck with all the rest of the work there.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so where do you see all this going now for yourself? I mean, what's next?
Yeah, well, I think my attitude my focus really has changed a bit since starting. Coming from here, from Kyoto University, the Primate Research Institute, I was really focused on my research here. But then moving into the zoo world, I recognize that there's a lot of other aspects to what I do there that I can have a hand in. So that, like we said about conservation, public outreach. So I'd like to work on those issues, and also trying to spread this paradigm. I think is really important, because these touch panel tasks are great research tools to give us more insight into the grade 8 mentality, but also it's really good enrichment for them. So I think it's a win-win to have touch panel tasks at zoos.
Yeah.
So I'd like to help kind of spread that message and kind of be there for zoos in general that want to get started and need advice and that kind of thing. So I'd like to kind of change the landscape in that way.
I think it follows really well from your education here at Kyoto University, right? Where, I mean, the I Project has always been about using technology to enhance our ability to kind of test and understand the ape cognition. And here you are now at a zoo, and I guess using tech for these types of purposes in zoos is also on the rise. And you were saying that you have this maybe a zoo tech conference to go to in the near future as well.
Yeah, this has been kind of an area that's getting bigger, is how to use technology at zoos. And I think there's a lot of overlap with museums and that sort of thing for signage and like interactive signs for people. But I think the real special thing about zoos is that it's an opportunity to use technology with animals in ways that enrich their lives. So that issue, it's always been around, but I think at this point it's getting to be a focus. And I think that touch panels play a huge role in that, a central role really, because there's so much versatility with them to give all sorts of tasks, different kinds of things. So yeah, I'll go to the zoo tech conference in Silicon Valley where there's a bunch of professionals meeting to talk about this issue. Yeah.
All right. And so, well, it's been great having you here back in Inuyama for the past week.
Yeah, it's good to be back in Inuyama.
And don't know when the next time will be, but we'll definitely hook up again in Chicago. So
all right.
Hopefully have some more fun with the PrimateCast there and present a crazy poster on chaos theory and chimpanzee choice patterns.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Should decide which one of us is going to give the talk.
All right.
All right. So Dr. Chris Martin, thanks for joining us again on the PrimateCast.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Cool.